Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project. Link to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request.
So finally we get a new story. I apologize, the last one was so long, it took up so many weeks. But this one is also a little bit long, but not quite as long. It is also a direct sequel to a story I wrote quite a while ago entitled His Hold Has Turned So Tight. If you have not read that story, you're going to have no idea what's going on in this one. I only mention that because I released His Hold Has Turned So Tight as a standalone. It's not a standalone. So please give that a listen if you haven't yet. It's a pretty important story, as is this one. So without further ado, here is Juno's Been Had, Part 1. Andrew was really sick of 80s music. That was all they played day in and day out in Vision Quest, the last video rental store in the city. His boss said that it added to the atmosphere, but Andrew was pretty sure that it was simply the most plain and inoffensive choice possible. Sometimes he fantasized about plugging his phone into the stereo system in the back and blasting some Rammstein or something just to see what the reaction would be. He had a lot of time for fantasies like that, as besides the entire population of retirees over the age of 70, not many people ventured into the somewhat fluorescent interior of his place of business. After all, what use were video rentals in the year of our Lord and Savior 2017? Which is why Andrew found himself surprised when the jingle bells over the door, the ones that still hadn't been taken down 4 months late, rang out mournfully, and he caught sight of a young, well-dressed woman standing on the threshold. She looked a little out of place, obviously, and by her general demeanor she seemed to agree with this assessment. She looked a bit lost as she stood in the door in her pressed skirt and blouse. Andrew slid his feet off the counter and shoved the catalog he'd been occupying himself with into a drawer. Can I help you?" he asked. She looked over and finally noticed him. Such was the fate of the lowly retail worker, he supposed. Relief spreading across her face, she approached the counter, her heels thumping against the space-patterned carpet. But as she did so, Andrew felt goosebumps rising on his skin. Because as she came closer, recognition started pinging rapidly around his skull. He knew her. At least he was pretty sure he did. It had been 10 years, maybe more. But he knew that way she raised one eyebrow and pursed her lips when she was confused. She'd let the bleached blonde hair fade back to brown, but it was definitely her. Alex Cross. Luckily, it didn't seem like she recognized him. The last time they'd seen each other, his voice hadn't dropped yet. He wasn't sure he wanted her to recognize him. Because Alex looked good, healthy, thriving. She looked like she'd made it. Andrew hadn't. He supposed it could be worse. He'd gotten out of that fucking trailer, even if it hadn't been under the greatest of circumstances. But here he was, 23 years old, living in a shithole and working at the last video rental store in the city. He was a loser. She was not. Just like it had been back then. Like nothing had changed at all. It felt like the label would become permanent if he told her, the only person who had ever known his damage. He rubbed his palm subconsciously, feeling the ridges of the scar there. It was definitely a good thing she hadn't recognized him. "Actually, I'm looking for someone," she said, reaching for something in her pocket. Oh no. It was him. It had to be, right? He had no idea how she tracked him down. Andrew left very little trace of himself on purpose. He was just about to open his mouth to tell her that she didn't need to look for Andrew Zhang because he was, in fact, right in front of her, when she pulled out a piece of paper and showed him. It was a printout of what looked like a mugshot. The man in the photo, well, it was his boss. "Andrei Kreminski," she said. "What do you need him for?" It was a simple enough question, but for him the emphasis was on the you instead of the him. She sighed and pulled out a badge. Alex Cross, she introduced herself. FBI. He's wanted for questioning. Well, that was the confirmation he'd been looking for, but she was FBI? How in the world had that happened? She must have noticed his confusion because she looked at his face properly for the first time and paused. Do I know you? She asked. He really should lie. She should just turn around and walk right out of here and out of his life. It would be for the best. But that scar on his palm started itching. Well, he waffled. No way! Her professional demeanor melted away as recognition spread across her features. Andrew? She asked. Andrew Zhang? Well, he was really in it now. Are you... It was a long time ago. She almost looked a little disappointed, but he remembered. Of course he did. There was no way he could possibly forget. The lake, right? He said. I think we were about 13. You do remember! She beamed. What are the odds? Minuscule. He found her smile a little infectious despite himself. So you're FBI? It's a long story. She groaned. I'm mostly getting sent out on petty errands at the moment. Kreminsky's your boss, right? All I'm here to do is ask him some questions about some mob connections he hasn't had for 20 years. Oh, well, he's out all day. Won't be back until, tomorrow, I think. I can give you his phone number. No need. She waved it off. I don't want to freak him out. When do you get off? 'Cause that leaves the rest of my day free. We could always get some coffee or something. God, he wanted to say no. But it was Alex. She was here. This woman didn't know it, but she'd been the catalyst for change in his life a decade ago. Maybe she could be again. Plus, he just really wanted to talk to her. Andrew glanced at the clock. About 40 minutes, but there's a pretty nice cafe right down the street. Conveniently dodging the fact that he didn't have a car. Sorry for the wait. Despite the inconvenience, she agreed, and headed back outside to make a quick call. Meanwhile, Andrew grabbed his catalog, but he didn't really register anything it said. It was going to be a long 40 minutes. They didn't say a whole ton as they walked on the block towards the cafe. He didn't know about her, but Andrew found himself at a pretty firm loss for words. A couple of hours ago, it had been a normal, shitty morning, just like any other, and now he was walking alongside someone he'd never thought he'd ever see again. The inside of the cafe was a little dim, and Andrew and Alex quietly slipped into a booth near the back. The backs of the benches were so tall that they were effectively isolated from the rest of the room. For a second, neither of them said anything, just got a proper look at the other. Sorry, Alex said finally. It's just... that summer almost felt like something I'd made up, but here you are. Andrew Zhang in the flesh. I feel the same way. Andrew chuckled awkwardly. There's a lot of things I want to ask. I have no idea where to start. Ditto. She laughed, running a finger along the wood grain of the table. I guess, he stuttered as she didn't make to continue. What have you been doing for the last decade? FBI? How did that happen? Alex sighed like she'd expected that one. You'd be surprised. Life is so goddamn weird. She didn't know the half of it. It involves you, oddly enough, she admitted. Like I said, that whole summer never really felt real, I guess. I don't even really remember what happened that day out on the lake. She didn't specify, but she didn't need to. But it kept bugging me for years if what I thought I remembered had really, happened. I know what you mean. He lied. So, one summer, I think I was 17, I told my parents I was going on a road trip with some friends and I headed back down to the lake. I thought I'd meet up with you and see if our stories matched up. He glanced downwards, but I wasn't there. Not only that, nobody would even talk about you. They'd clam up as soon as I mentioned your name. was getting a little worried you were dead or something. Andrew wished. Finally, someone directed me to the library and I had to go through their old microfilm archives. Felt like I was on an episode of The X-Files or something. Sighing, Andrew shook his head. I don't think a single person in that town has heard of a computer. He glanced over at her and realized that she was struggling to continue. So you found out about my dad, right? Yeah, she mumbled. I know that it might have been a relief more than anything, but I'm sorry. It's all right. Andrew looked away. I don't know if it was the greatest idea you've ever had, but I can see why you got out of there. Random break-ins are scary. It was a little rough, he admitted, but I figured it out eventually. Alex looked like she wanted him to elaborate, so he asked her a question instead. What did you do then? Well, she frowned, but continued. You were gone, so that was a dead end. So I did some more research on my own. I asked around. I spent hours with that stupid microfilm. I didn't really learn all that much, but the whole process made me realize something. I was having fun. I had never really even been into mystery novels or anything like that before. I went home empty-handed, but for months I kept thinking about it. Eventually, I finally told my parents that I was going to get a criminal law degree after I graduated and join the FBI, and they nearly disowned me. I still haven't spoken to my dad in years. He'd much rather I use that degree to become a lawyer. But it was what you wanted to do, right? Oh, of course. Haven't regretted it for a second. I think I might be a little jealous, he admitted, knowing exactly what you want to be doing with your life. It must be nice. She smiled a little bitterly. Sure, but then the problem is achieving it. Sometimes I think it might be easier to just not have any goals at all. But, she shook herself. We've spent this whole time talking about me, and I am not repeating that again. Where have you been? What have you been doing all this time? Shit. He started lamely. It's not really that interesting. She just stared at him, waiting. Well, I've been drifting around, mostly, working whatever job comes my way. I got here maybe a year ago, I guess. Must have been rough. Well, when you come from shit, anything's an improvement. Yeah. She looked thoughtful. Can I ask you a question? He shrugged. That day, all those years ago, back in that cave. But she never got to finish, because just then her cell phone rang. She glanced down before scrunching her eyes shut. Shit. I've got to take this. She rubbed her temple, and it's probably going to be a while. You've still got to talk to my boss, right? He asked as she stood. Yeah, I'll be back at the video store in the morning. Then I'll see you then. Even though she was hovering over the table now, she seemed to be struggling. Here's my number, she said finally, pulling out a business card, in case you want to get in touch about, anything. Alex turned and hurried out of the cafe. Andrew watched her go, a sinking feeling in his chest. It was happening again. His life was about to get really weird again, wasn't it? His palm itched. Alex waited until she was a good distance away towards her car before she accepted the call. Hello, she said primly, as if nothing was wrong. The voice on the other end wasn't buying it.
Alex,
it began, unamused.
Where are you?
What do you mean? She asked, opening the door to her unassuming brown Honda. I'm working a case.
Without me? Bullshit.
Alex started the engine, but didn't get anywhere just yet. What are you trying to say, Trip? She frowned. Alex really didn't like keeping things from her partner, but in this scenario, she didn't really have a choice.
What case has you going MIA for 4 days? You didn't tell anyone where you were going. Nobody's been able to get in touch with you. The chief's steamed.
Tell her I'm taking a sabbatical.
Stop pussyfooting around this.
She could hear Tripp's frown through the phone.
You're going after him, aren't you?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You're a bad liar.
Tripp was getting pissed off. He was probably pacing back and forth around his office right about now. I'm not lying.
Please, just tell me where you are. I promise I won't tell anyone. Just let me come and help you.
Sorry. She closed her eyes. even though he wasn't even there. I can't do that.
He's a murderer, Alex.
We don't know that. She must have said it too quietly for him to hear through the static, or maybe he just didn't understand what she meant.
What?
He asked. I said we don't know that. That is what I'm trying to find out.
Come on, Cross. I know how long you've been sifting through all the old evidence. You can't honestly believe he's innocent.
For the time being, everything I have is circumstantial. Of all people, you should know that means jack shit. I don't know what I think until I have definitive proof one way or another.
Alex, please, let me just...
But they were just going to start going in circles if they kept up like this. I'm sorry, Trip. I have to go.
Wait.
I'm hanging up now, she said firmly. Goodbye. After hanging up the call, she shifted the car into drive and did just that. She needed to get some things in order, because it wasn't long now until everything was going to get very complicated. It was worse at night. During the light of day, it was much easier to maintain normalcy, or the semblance of it, at least. But at night, he knew it wouldn't do anything. Not at all. But he still barricaded himself into his apartment. He wasn't worried about anything breaking in. He was worried about something getting out. Needless to say, he didn't sleep a lot. It was going to be especially bad tonight. He could tell. His palm had been burning ever since he'd grabbed Alex's card. As he sat on the small, creaky bed in the corner of his shitty studio apartment, he rubbed that scar. The one in the shape of two impossibly intersecting squares. Absently. Waiting. That was the worst part. The waiting. Because sometimes nothing would happen at all, and then right around 4 a.m, he'd finally try to go to bed. On evenings like this, he still hoped that would be the case, even if all signs pointed to the contrary. But he wouldn't know until he did, and he had no idea when that would be. It always started with a vague itch, though not one that he could scratch. Not on his skin, but like some sort of thing was wriggling around in his head, under his skull. After that, he'd start to get lightheaded and feel a strange disconnect between his body and mind, hence why he stuck to the bed. Sometimes his feeling would get worse, sometimes he would black out entirely. Often he remained somewhat conscious, though he was pretty sure that wasn't a good thing. It used to terrify him. Now he just accepts it with a sort of dull apathy. Andrew has lived with him for 10 years, after all. A weight settles on his chest. He's here.
Hey, kid,
says a voice, though Andrew doesn't bother looking around. He knows it's coming from his own mouth.
Kid!
It insists, a little louder. In the past, Andrew would try to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't there. But then he gets bored, and bad things happen when he is bored. What do you want? Andrew asks through gritted teeth.
What's with that tone?
The voice sounds vaguely offended.
Are you mad at me or something? I haven't even done anything that bad recently. Or... Oh, wait. I know. You're trying to keep something from me, aren't you?
He doesn't always know what Andrew is thinking. The line between them is thin, but there is a line. Their cohabitation is stable. Andrew tries desperately to keep his mind blank, to think of something inane, like the 80s music at work. Sometimes Guns N' Roses will get him to shut up.
It's no good, kid. I can see right through you.
Damn, not even Welcome to the Jungle is helping. That's the worst one.
What is it? What is it that you're so desperate to hide from me? Let's see here. Could it be... Oh.
He laughs, shaking Andrew's body with fits.
Well, isn't that just poetic? Almost can't believe it myself. Exactly 10 years later. And there she is, the little tart that started this whole thing. She's the one who almost ruined everything. What I wouldn't give to...
Don't you fucking touch her! Andrew can feel that alien rage rising in his own chest, but he pushes it back down.
Or what?
Andrew's head tilts to the side.
What do you think you can possibly do to stop me?
For the millionth time, Andrew searches for something, anything he can do. But as always, he draws a blank. Not even killing himself worked. He's tried that more than once.
I don't know why you're trying to defend her, the voice continues. She's technically here for your boss, right? You know that eventually she's going to find out what you did.
What you did, Andrew insists. That wasn't me. It almost sounds like he's trying to convince himself.
Maybe so, but I don't really exist, right? At least not to everyone out there. It's your fingerprints all over that corpse in the back room, not mine.
Fuck you.
You know, throughout this whole affair of ours, I've never quite understood why you're always so upset. I'm just trying to fulfill my end of the bargain. You're the one who wanted your life to be special. I've given you so many great inciting incidents, but you never want to be a part of them. You just keep running away.
Because you always try to cast me as the villain.
Don't you know that's the best part to play? Why be a dumb hero when you can have some real fun? You know, get a little crazy with it.
This isn't some kind of story. This is real life.
And I fixed yours, didn't I? Got you out of that trailer in the middle of nowhere fast.
Andrew stiffens. He doesn't want to remember that. He doesn't want to remember what happened that night. Yet he does. He does anyway. His face was hurting from another drunken fit. His father was screaming in his face. His palm was burning, and then he simply lost it. He watched, like a movie, as his own limbs reached for the kitchen knife, and then his vision was almost entirely consumed by red, and the taste of iron filled his mouth. He tried to scream, but he couldn't. He tried to stop his arm from moving, but he couldn't. Couldn't he even wipe that smile off his face, the one that was threatening to split his cheeks with how broad it was? Not even that. And yet he could feel that knife plunging down again and again, feel the blood drenching his gray sweatshirt. When he finally regained control over his own faculties again, all he could do was run. You haven't fixed shit, Andrew mutters. Everything just keeps getting worse.
It wouldn't if you would just play along.
I'm not going to do that. I can't. He's wanted to. The thought has crossed his mind so many times to just give up the ghost. But still, as it always does, just when he's teetering on the edge, her face comes to his mind again. Now it's no longer that of a child. And that makes it worse. That makes her real.
She's going to find out, the voice says, and I can't let that happen. I'm not done here yet. Sorry, kid. Them's the breaks.
I swear to God, you son of a... But sometimes, even when he regains that broken will, there's still nothing he can do. Nothing at all. He doesn't finish his sentence. He doesn't let him. A roaring sound like he's just dived underwater fills his ears, and everything becomes dim and hazy. Now, if you'll excuse me, even the voice sounds a little distant now, despite the feeling of his own vocal cords working.
I've got a phone call to make.